When I exposed my stepmom's fraudulent scheme, she was furious and pushed me hard from the top of the stairs. I fell and was badly injured. She wanted to end my life and take control of my inheritance. Little did she know, my revenge would strike back harder than she could ever imagine, leaving her powerless at my feet. My life changed in a way I never saw coming. It's funny how you can think you know someone, trust them even, only to find out that trust was never mutual. If you had told me a year ago that my own family would turn against me, I wouldn't have believed you. But now, sitting here today, I know better. It all started when my father passed away. Richard Carter, successful, respected, larger than life. To me, though, he was just Dad. He always had this way of making the world feel safer. He taught me to ride a bike, to stand up for myself, and even helped me paint my first mural on the wall of our garage. That's who he was, my hero. And when he died, it felt like my whole world fell apart. I still remember that day so vividly. The phone call came early in the morning. I was sipping my coffee, sketching out ideas for a new project, when I heard Sophia's voice crack on the other end of the line. She didn't even need to say it. I could hear it in her tone. My dad was gone. A heart attack, they said. Sudden and unexpected. The shock of it didn't hit me all at once. It crept in slowly, like a fog settling over my mind. A week later, we gathered at the Carter estate in Chicago for the funeral. Our family home felt so different without him, empty, like a shell of what it used to be. People came and went, offering condolences, but all I could focus on was how everything seemed to be slipping through my fingers. My stepmother, Vera, was hosting the reception, playing the role of the grieving widow. She looked elegant, as always, dressed in black, with her perfectly manicured hands gripping a glass of wine. But something about her felt off. Detached, maybe? Or maybe it was just me, reading too much into things in my grief. I tried to be civil with Vera. After all, she had been a part of our lives for over a decade. She married my dad when I was 15, and while we never had the warmest relationship, we got along well enough. Or so I thought. It was a few days after the funeral when things started to feel strange. Vera called me into my father's office to discuss some paperwork. I didn't think much of it at first. She handed me a stack of documents and asked me to sign them, saying they were just formalities related to the estate. Her voice was calm, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Chloe, darling, we need to get this sorted out quickly. It's what your father would have wanted," she said, tapping the papers with one of her blood-red nails. I hesitated. "What are these exactly?" "Oh, nothing complicated. Just transferring some assets. You don't need to read through all the legal jargon. Just sign here, here, and here." Her tone was smooth, almost too smooth. That's when my gut told me something was wrong. My dad always told me to trust my instincts, so I decided to stall. "I'll need some time to look these over," I said, trying to sound casual. Her expression shifted ever so slightly, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face before she regained her composure. "Of course, take your time," she said, but I could feel the tension in her voice. That night, I couldn't sleep. Something about the whole situation gnawed at me. Why was she so eager for me to sign those papers? And why didn't she explain what they were for? The next morning, I called Peter Hughes, an old family friend and my dad's retired lawyer. Peter had known my father for years and was someone I trusted completely. When Peter arrived at the estate later that day, he had a sealed envelope with him. "Your father asked me to give this to you if anything ever happened to him," he explained, handing it over. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a letter, written in my father's unmistakable handwriting. "Chloe, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer here. I need you to know something important. The estate and everything tied to it rightfully belong to you. Your mother set up a trust before she passed, ensuring you would always be taken care of. I've kept this arrangement in place, but I suspect Vera may try to challenge it. Be cautious, my darling. Trust Peter and trust yourself. I know you'll do what's right. Love always, Dad." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My father knew. He knew Vera couldn't be trusted. I looked up at Peter, who nodded solemnly. "Your father was a smart man. He wanted to make sure you were protected." I spent the rest of the day trying to process everything. Vera wasn't just pushing me to sign papers. She was trying to take what wasn't hers. The thought of it made my blood boil. I couldn't let her get away with it. But I also knew I needed to be careful. Vera was cunning, and if my father's letter was any indication, she was already plotting something bigger. That night, I confided in Sophia, my best friend since college. Over the years, Sophia had become more like a sister to me. She was a journalist, sharp and relentless when it came to uncovering the truth. If anyone could help me figure out what Vera was up to, it was her. I knew there was something off about that woman, Sophia said after I showed her the letter. Don't worry, Chloe. We'll get to the bottom of this. As I sat there with Sophia, a mix of fear and determination swirling inside me, I realized this was just the beginning. My father had trusted me to protect his legacy, and I wasn't about to let him down. Little did I know, the fight ahead would test me in ways I never imagined. The days that followed were some of the most unsettling of my life. After reading my father's letter, I couldn't shake the feeling that Vera was always watching me, waiting for me to let my guard down. The Carter estate no longer felt like my home. It felt like a battleground. Sophia wasted no time diving into the investigation. Chloe, if what your dad said in that letter is true, Vera might already be taking steps to cover her tracks. We need to find proof, anything that shows what she's been up to, she told me over coffee at my kitchen table. I nodded. I don't know where to start, but I have to do this. For my dad. For my mom's legacy. That night, Sophia and I started combing through my father's old office. It was a strange experience, sitting in the space where he had spent so much of his time building the Carter legacy. The scent of his cologne still lingered faintly, and his desk was neatly organized, as though he had only stepped away for a moment. Sophia found it first, a folder tucked away in a locked drawer. It took a few tries, but I managed to guess the combination. Inside were copies of financial statements, legal documents, and handwritten notes. One note stood out: Trust, sole beneficiary, Chloe. It was dated a few months before my father passed. My heart ached as I imagined him meticulously preparing everything to protect me. This is it, Sophia said, holding up the document. This proves you're the rightful heir. I let out a shaky breath. It's a start. But it doesn't explain what Vera's been up to. We didn't have to wait long to find out. 2 days later, Peter called me. Chloe, I've been going over some of the estate records, and there are irregularities, transfers, and withdrawals that don't make sense. Some of the assets seem to have been liquidated, but the money isn't accounted for. What does that mean? I asked, though I already had an idea. It means someone is tampering with the estate. My guess? Vera. My stomach churned. How do we prove it? Keep looking for anything unusual, emails, transactions, anything that might connect her to these irregularities. And be careful, Chloe. If Vera suspects you know, she could become dangerous. Dangerous. The word stuck with me. Vera had always been calculating, but I'd never thought of her as someone who would hurt me. At least, not physically. But the more I uncovered, the more I realized how far she might go to get what she wanted. One evening, I was alone in the estate, flipping through old security footage from the house's surveillance system. Most of it was uneventful, staff going about their duties, Vera hosting her endless string of social events. But then, I found something that made my blood run cold. In the footage, Vera was in my father's office, rifling through his desk. This was days after his death. She pulled out a document, glanced at it, and smiled, a cold, satisfied smile that sent a chill down my spine. Then she handed it to someone just out of the frame. I rewound the footage and froze it. The man was tall, wearing a dark suit. I didn't recognize him, but Sophia did. That's Ronald Pierce, she said when I showed her the still image the next morning. He's a notorious lawyer, shady as they come. He's been involved in cases of fraud and forgery before, but nothing's ever stuck. This can't be a coincidence. It wasn't. As Sophia dug deeper, she found a trail linking Pierce to Vera. He had been helping her siphon money from the estate into offshore accounts. Vera wasn't just trying to take the estate. She was dismantling it piece by piece. I confronted her that night. It was reckless, I know that now, but I was angry and scared. She was in the sitting room, sipping her usual glass of red wine, when I walked in. "We need to talk," I said, my voice trembling. Vera looked up at me with a raised eyebrow. "About what, dears?" "I know what you've been doing," I said, holding up a folder of documents Sophia had helped me compile. "The embezzlement, the forged signatures, the fake sales. I have proof."
For a moment, she looked surprised.
Then she laughed, a soft, cruel sound. "Chloe, you've been busy, haven't you? But let me give you some advice. Proof means nothing if you don't have the power to back it up." Her words shook me more than I wanted to admit. But I didn't back down. "You're not going to get away with this," I said, turning to leave. I didn't make it far. As I reached the staircase, I felt her hand grab my arm. "You don't know who you're dealing with," she hissed, her nails digging into my skin. Then, in one swift motion, she shoved me. My body tumbled down the stairs, hitting each step with a sickening thud. I landed in a crumpled heap at the bottom, pain radiating through me. When I opened my eyes, Vera was standing at the top of the stairs, looking down at me with a cold, detached expression. "Stay out of my way," she said before turning and walking away. I don't remember much after that. Sophia found me later and called an ambulance. I was bruised and battered, but alive. And as I lay in that hospital bed, I made a promise to myself. I wasn't going to let Vera win. Whatever it took, I would fight for my father's legacy and for justice. Waking up in that hospital bed was a moment I'll never forget. Every inch of my body ached, and the memories of Vera pushing me down the stairs replayed in my mind like a bad dream. Except it wasn't a dream, it was real. She had made it clear that she wasn't afraid to hurt me to get what she wanted. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just about the estate anymore. It was about survival. Sophia was by my side when I woke up, her face a mixture of relief and anger. "I can't believe she did this to you," she said, gripping my hand tightly. "Chloe, this has gone too far. We need to go to the police." I wanted to. Every fiber of my being wanted to see Vera in handcuffs. But I also knew it wasn't that simple. Vera was cunning, and she had people like Ronald Pierce working for her. If we went to the police without solid evidence, she'd twist the story and make me look like the villain. I needed something undeniable, something that would leave her with no way out. That's when I remembered the security cameras. "Sophia, the house has surveillance cameras," I said, my voice hoarse. "There might be footage of what happened." She nodded immediately. "I'll get Peter to help. You focus on recovering." Over the next few days, as I healed, Sophia and Peter worked tirelessly to gather everything we needed. Peter pulled strings to access financial records, while Sophia combed through hours of security footage. They were relentless, and their determination kept me going. I couldn't have done any of this without them. Finally, a breakthrough came. Sophia walked into my hospital room one afternoon, holding a laptop. "You're going to want to see this," she said, setting it down on the tray table in front of me. I pressed play, and there it was, clear footage of Vera pushing me down the stairs. My stomach churned as I watched it, but I also felt a strange sense of relief. We had proof. She couldn't deny this. "That's not all," Sophia said, opening another folder on her laptop. Peter found more evidence of her financial schemes. Bank statements, forged signatures, everything we need to expose her. As I stared at the mountain of evidence we had gathered, I felt a flicker of hope. For the first time in weeks, it felt like we might actually win this fight. But I also knew the hardest part was still ahead. The will reading was just a few days away, and Vera would undoubtedly try to use it to solidify her claim to the estate. If we were going to stop her, we needed to be prepared. Peter arranged for a meeting with a family lawyer, someone who had worked with my father for years and could help us navigate the legal battle ahead. When the day of the will reading finally arrived, I felt a mix of nerves and determination. The family and legal representatives gathered in the grand sitting room of the Carter estate. Vera was there, of course, dressed in a sleek black suit and exuding her usual confidence. She glanced at me briefly, her lips curling into a smug smile. I met her gaze, refusing to back down. The reading began, and as expected, Vera presented forged documents claiming full ownership of the estate. She spoke with an air of authority, as though she had already won. "Richard trusted me to handle the estate," she said, her voice dripping with false sincerity. "These documents confirm his wishes." But just as the lawyer was about to move forward, Peter stood up. "I'm afraid that's not true," he said, holding up a folder. "We have evidence to the contrary." The room fell silent as Peter laid out everything: the surveillance footage, the financial records, and my father's letter naming me as the rightful heir. As the evidence was presented, Vera's confident facade began to crack. She tried to interrupt, claiming the documents were fake, but the lawyer silenced her. Then came the final blow. Ronald Pierce, her lawyer and accomplice, had been called to testify. Under pressure and facing the risk of his own arrest, he confessed to everything: how Vera had hired him to forge documents, siphon money, and sell assets illegally. His testimony was the nail in the coffin. Vera's face turned pale as the reality sank in. The lawyer turned to me, his tone respectful. "Chloe, as per your father's wishes, the estate and all its assets are legally yours." I couldn't speak for a moment. The weight of everything that had happened hit me all at once. I had done it. I had honored my father's legacy and protected what he had built. But it wasn't over yet. As the legal proceedings wrapped up, the police arrived to arrest Vera. She glared at me as they led her away, her eyes filled with hatred. "This isn't over," she hissed, but I didn't care. For the first time in weeks, I felt free. As I stood in the grand sitting room, surrounded by the people who had helped me through this ordeal, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was my family's legacy, and I was ready to rebuild it. Watching Vera being led away in handcuffs was surreal. I had spent so much time worrying, fighting, and doubting myself that I hadn't imagined what victory would feel like. But there it was, justice, in its purest form. The woman who had tried to destroy everything my father worked for was finally being held accountable. After the will reading, I took some time to process everything. I met with Peter and Sophia, who had been my rocks through all of this. I also had an unexpected conversation with my half-brother, Jake. He had been distant for years, ever since our father married Vera. I'd always believed he sided with her, but now I realized he was just as manipulated as I had been. "Chloe," Jake began, his voice hesitant. "I didn't know about any of this. Vera, she had me convinced you were trying to take everything for yourself. I should have known better." I studied his face, searching for sincerity, and found it in the way his shoulders slumped, the way his eyes avoided mine. He wasn't the enemy. He was just another victim of Vera's lies. "It's not your fault, Jake," I said. "She fooled all of us." He nodded, his jaw tightening. "I want to make things right. If there's anything I can do to help, just let me know." His offer surprised me, but it also gave me hope. For the first time in years, I felt like we could rebuild our relationship and the Carter legacy together. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Taking control of the estate was no small task. Peter helped me navigate the legal complexities, ensuring that every last piece of Vera's embezzlement was uncovered and undone. The more we uncovered, the more horrified I became at the extent of her greed. Millions of dollars had been funneled into secret accounts, and parts of the estate had been sold under fraudulent pretenses. It would take time to recover everything, but at least now I was in control. I also made a decision about the estate that would honor both of my parents' memories. My father had built this empire from the ground up, but my mother had always been passionate about giving back. She was an artist, and some of my earliest memories were of sitting beside her as she painted. Inspired by her, I decided to convert part of the estate into a community art center. It would be a place where local artists could create, learn, and showcase their work, a way to give back to the city that had supported my family for generations. Sophia, of course, loved the idea. "Your mom would be so proud," she said when I told her. "And your dad, too. This is exactly the kind of legacy they would have wanted." Jake surprised me by offering to help fund the project. "I want to contribute," he said. "This family has a lot of repairing to do, but maybe this is a way to start." Together, we began transforming the estate. It wasn't easy. Every step was a reminder of the chaos Vera had left behind. But with each day, I felt a little stronger, a little more confident. The art center began to take shape, and I knew it was the right decision. This was more than just a building. It was a symbol of resilience, creativity, and hope. As the project moved forward, I also testified in the trial against Vera. Seeing her in court, facing the consequences of her actions, was bittersweet. Part of me felt sorry for her, not for what she had done, but for the emptiness that must have driven her greed. She had destroyed herself in her quest for power, and now she would have to live with the consequences. The trial ended with Vera being convicted of fraud, embezzlement, and assault. She was sentenced to several years in prison, and Ronald Pierce received his own punishment for his role in her schemes. Justice had been served, and for the first time in months, I could breathe freely. When the art center finally opened, it was a celebration like no other. Friends, family, and local artists gathered at the estate to see what we had created. Standing on the steps of the newly renovated building, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. My father's legacy was secure, and my mother's spirit lived on in every brushstroke, every sculpture, every artist who walked through those doors. Jake stood beside me, smiling as we watched the crowd.
"You did it," he said.
"We did it," I corrected him. "This is just the beginning." As I looked around, surrounded by the people who had stood by me through everything, I realized how far I had come. Vera's betrayal had tested me in ways I never imagined, but it had also shown me the strength of loyalty, perseverance, and family. In the end, I hadn't just reclaimed my inheritance, I had reclaimed my life, my purpose, and my future. Standing there, with the sun setting behind the Carter estate, I knew I was ready for whatever came next.